Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on playing out from the back. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, we're going to be focusing on a pattern of play, which is going to be looking at two different ways to try and play out from the back and then try and score. But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we're using. Now, in terms of players for this week, we've got 16 outfield players plus a goalkeeper, but you can adapt to some more players or less players as well. So if you do have less players, say you had two less players, just two players out of either side, and then in the small side of games you can just take players out as well. If you have more players, you can look to obviously add more players in. If you wanted to, you could add an extra pass, or even like a defender once the ball comes into the striker here, which we can talk about. Now in terms of the equipment, mainly focusing on using balls, bibs, cones, and then if you have poles or mannequins you want to use for certain areas, that's great. And again, if you don't have small sided goals, once we go into the small sided games, you can use poles or cones for that as well. Now, in terms of the setup for this part of the session, okay, you want to be using half a pitch, okay? Now, if you don't have half a pitch or you're working with younger players, you can look to decrease that, okay? So, the centre-backs here, okay, so everyone's going to be doing different roles anyway. We'll be starting, obviously, as they do in a game, on the 6-yard box just outside of it. Wide players, nice high and wide just outside the box. And then the two midfielders, again, kind of on line with the edge of the 6-yard box, okay? Just outside the box, about 25 yards. This player will be about 20 yards, the strikers. And then we go further up the pitch here. So you can use different areas of the pitch. So as we got the edge of the box here for these players, and then these players stay on the same line as the strikers. Again, judging by how much space that you've got, that's where you can obviously look to put the players. And then with the age group as well, let's say you're working with younger players and you've only got 12 players, okay? You can just look to obviously take a certain pass out if you want, or you can just look to work off one side or make things a little bit shorter, that's fine. Now, we're going to do two different patterns, okay? So we'll speak about the left side first and the right side second, and then the players can swap over. And then after they've had a go at doing it each side, we can then do it the opposite way. So the side that was in doing the pattern this side can do it that side, okay? So working off both sides and both feet as well. Now, the first one will start, it's always going to start with the goalkeeper with the ball. Goalkeeper plays out to the centre-back, who will open out. Now, for this one here, centre-back will play to the full-back. So we're focusing on our movement, so we want the player to drop in, okay? Because it entices a wide player to drop with them, okay? Once they've done that, the midfielder comes in short to receive it on the back foot. Then what we're looking for is the midfielder to then play into the wide player. So we broke through the lines there. So that's how we've played out. Okay, now we're going to focus on trying to score. Okay, so things like this have got to be done quickly. Wide player will then play into this player here, who then opens out, plays to the forward, who looks to open out and finish, okay? So it's just trying to gain confidence, working on movements, working on our body shape to receive the ball, limiting our touches, okay, and trying to move the ball quickly. So the players would just follow their passes. So centre-back will go to be the full-back to me midfielder, midfielder to the winger becomes the midfielder in here, midfielder becomes the striker goes to the back of the queue. So again, use the cones or the poles as a reference, okay, to move away from. So when the centre-back gets the ball, that's when we're looking for this player to come out. Because then if they can receive and play first time into midfielder who's going to create an angle to receive and then play the ball through, perfect, okay? Then we want this player to open out, play into here, and then again, forward can drop in, receive it inside or take it down the line, and then finish. Now, that's the first pattern. So, again, the players don't have to be in bibs for this, okay, just so obviously we can recognise it. Now, the second one now will work differently. So, keeper will play into the centre-back, who opens out, midfielder drops in, but we still want the full-back to do the same thing, drop in. Then what we're looking for is, it comes into midfielder. Now, when the midfielder receives the ball, okay, they're going to play to the wide player, okay? So, it can either be to the feet, or it can be slided in front of them, okay? Then what we're looking for is movement from the winger. When this player receives the ball here, we want them to come off the line inside, okay, to play 1, 2, and then we play to the midfielder here, who opens out, plays to the forward, takes it into space, and finishes. So again, the players will follow, we'll just move up one each time. So centre-back comes to be midfielder. Midfielder becomes the full-back. Full-back becomes the wide player. Wide player to be midfielder. Midfielder to be the forward. Forward goes to the back of the queue. So again, working through this one, when the centre-back receives it, we want the midfielder dropping in, okay, whilst this player drops into here as well, okay? So they're starting there, they're dropping in as if they're going to receive the ball. Then, when this player receives the ball, we want them to make that run into space. Ideally, we want that to be a pass in front, okay? But we can just adapt to it. Then we're looking for the wide player, okay, to make this movement. So this player here could start a little bit wide if he wanted to. Move in off the line, okay? Set it into space, we're playing out there. Then we go to midfielder. And then we carry on from there, open out, play into the striker, and then finish. Again, our body shape to receive the ball, time of our movements, exaggerating movements as well, okay? Keeping the game realistic, and then adapting to any bad touches or any bad passes, okay, to make sure we keep the tempo flowing at all times. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now moving into the first of our small-sided games. Now, for this one, again, we're going to be focusing on the start point being playing out from the back, okay? And we're going to have an overload for the team who's going to be working in possession to get to play out from the back. Now, how we're going to set up, okay, again, try and maximise as much use of a pitch that you've got, okay? So we're going to use half a pitch here, okay? And we're just going to have between 15 and 20 yards of depth for this area in here, and then we split it in the middle. Now, these players have to stay in, okay? But once the ball comes into this area, players are free to move and support. So no more defenders are allowed to come in until the ball's gone in here, whether it's been received or whether a player dribbles it in there, okay? So 7v6 in here, 2v1 in here, so 9 versus 7. Again, if you have more and less players, you can just adapt it. You can increase the space that you have. And obviously, if you have less players, you can look to decrease it if you need to. And just take less players out. So let's say you had 3 less players, it could just be 7 and 6, and you've got to try and get the ball in this area to score. There's a quick adaptation. Now, we're going to be starting here. So again, when the centre-back receives the ball, near side full-back drops, entices the winger to come in, then it leaves space to play through, okay? Then what we want to see is movement in midfield. So when the centre-back receives the ball, okay, can we get players showing? Try and occupy, the striker to come in, try and bring a midfielder in as well, okay? We need to see rotation as well. So, if this player doesn't get the ball, okay, striker's in here, let's say, then can we spin out to then create space for another midfielder to come in? Because when they receive that ball here, they might be able to go on the back foot and play like we were working before with the other midfielders. So again, it's about communicating with each other as well. So when this ball comes into this player, if they've got time to turn out, tell them. If they've got a man on, okay, tell them, because then it can just be bounced back. And that's where it's important that this player comes in, because then if this player jumps, then we can look to play out, or we can play across, then we can come into here to play into there. Now, the defender's allowed to move in any zone, so if the ball comes over to this side, they can look to go in there. This player has to stay in here, and this player has to stay in here at all times. So, we're trying to work the ball up quickly, okay, so we're playing out from the back. We want to do it quick, but then if there's no options, okay, if we're struggling to play out, let's say, we get the ball in here, the opposition, let's say they press quite well, okay, we just haven't found that pass. Then once it comes back into here, we could even go back to the goalkeeper and clip it, okay? Again, it doesn't have to go from centre-back to certain players. We can clip it. So then if we see the full-back, the winger coming in here, keeper gets it, okay? Let's say he plays to the centre-back. We can do that switch and play forward, okay? Because of how expansive we're being, okay, by stretching the pitch, we don't always have to play 5-yard passes and play through the lines, okay? In that way, we can switch play as well, okay? Because then we move the opposition about and it gives us more chance for players to get on the ball. So this ball can come into this player here, defender comes in, it can get played to here, and then we can look to play out there again. So creating different angles to play through. Now, when the Blues win the ball back, this player can move in. These 2 players have to stay locked in. Then it gives them 7v7, chance to score. So for us, obviously, then as the Reds, we're trying to retain some shape, stop the opposition scoring, win it back, and then we've got an outball to play out, okay, and play into there. Now you can obviously swap players over if you want to do it after a certain amount of time. You can swap the players in here over, swap the defender over, but obviously we're trying to keep the concept the same. So again, it requires body shape to receive the ball, being aware of our surroundings, confidence to get on the ball, how we receive the ball, how we communicate with each other, again, making sure we're doing the right things when the ball first comes in. Full-back start high and wide, near side full-back drops, okay. Move the ball in here. When this player receives the ball, if this player is pressing, this is why we drop in here. So then when this player receives the ball, they've got an outball to play out. Whereas, if this player receives the ball here, and it gets played into midfield, he's got no option there, okay? Whereas we've got that angle to play out, and then we can play forward. So talking to the players about angles in terms of where we need to be in our positioning, in terms of relation to the ball, movement ahead of the ball, okay? So this ball could get played into midfielder here, okay? Then we can start to see a third man run. So then if this player receives it in here, and then it goes out wide, we've got a player to make sure that we can overload and go the other way. Not players staying on the same line, showing and moving away in terms of where we're just coming in here. Don't get it, move out to there. Can we look to break the lines, okay, to move forward? And it could be that far side of the midfielder each time, okay, because they're making that run on the shoulder, which what can it do? It can also create space for this player here. So when the player pulls out into there, they can receive the ball, and then there's options in there as well. So one of the biggest things I'd say to relay onto the players is that you're always in the game. So they might not have received the ball, but they're always involved. They've got a part to play by moving, okay, to create space for the teammates and also for themselves to receive the ball. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now moving into our final small-sided game. Now, again, it's going to be an overload in terms of 9 versus 7, but we're going to be split into zones, and then as a progression, you can look to take the zones out. So, how it's going to be setup-wise. So, in terms of depth, okay, you might want to turn the pitch around and go the opposite way, so try and attack that way. So, a little bit less width, but more depth, which will obviously help a little bit because of how many zones we're going to be looking at. But obviously if you have more than half a pitch, you might just increase it a little bit, just so there's a little bit more room in these areas here. So we're going to have a 3v2 in here, 4v3 in here, and then 2v2 in here, with the aim for the Reds playing through to then score. Now, the players are locked in to start until the ball comes into this area. Once the ball comes into this area, the players are free to move until the play is finished. So we're starting off by having 2 centre-backs and a midfielder in here. Now when the centre-back receives the ball, we're looking on player obviously dropping to receive, play through. With the 2 strikers, they're obviously looking to pressure it. So we're looking to play out, get it into this area here, use our 4v3 to get the chances to play into the forwards to score. So obviously if we don't have to go in and support the forwards, that's great. But if we do, obviously that's fine. So focusing on different movements, making sure we're stretching the pitch, okay? If you wanted to, you could start with the back 4 all in here with 1 midfielder, and then you could take 1 more player out of here and put them in this area here. So let's say a 5 versus 3, and then you could have 3v3 in here and then 2v1 in here, so they're trying to match up in midfield, however you want to do it. What we're going to be focusing on is trying to play through quickly, so trying to play through in each zone as quick as we can, so as if we're playing through the opposition. So again in here, full-backs and start there and there each time. So we're trying to have obviously confidence playing through here. 1, 2, can we receive here? Now, obviously, these players can still receive the ball back as well. Now, then what we're looking at is angles to receive it. So, can this player drop in? Okay, we've got this player coming across as well. So we're trying to make it difficult for the opposition. This player doesn't need to be that wide when the ball's here. Narrow off inside the pitch, okay? Now, ball comes into midfielder here. That's when we need to say, time, man on. Okay, this is where this play is important, because if this play's over there, we haven't got an angle to play through. Whereas if this play's out here, okay, then we've got that angle to play into here, and then we can look to score, receive the ball, and go again. When the Blues win the ball back, the defenders are locked into their zones, okay? But the Blues aren't. So that's where they get a bit of a chance to score. So stays 3 in here, 4 in here, 2 in there. So let's say the Blues win the ball back in here. This player can move up, this player can bring the ball with them. Then they've got an overload in here. If they then play into here, these players are free to move up, which means they can try and get an overload to score in there as well. So there's a chance for them once they win the ball back to score, because obviously we don't want it to be too easy for the Reds, both in and out possession. They're obviously trying to stop the ball higher up to try and score. So again, start point, centre-back starting here, midfielder looks to drop in. When the centre-back gets the ball, full-backs, midfielders in here, can they look to receive it and play in? Now, what's our movements here? This player can receive it. Okay, can we play wide quickly against that 3? Now, again, if you wanted to, you could put an extra player in here to make it 4v4. But like I say, at first, let's make it a little bit easier for the Reds to play out. Let's gain some confidence. Let's work on different areas in terms of our movements and where we're going to be in relation to the ball. Then, once we've got the hang of it, zones come out of here, and then just playing normal, small-sided game, 9 versus 7, okay, with the aim to play out similar to like before, with the 2 goals, trying to score. So again, centre-back gets it, full-back midfielders, can we provide options to receive the ball? If this player can't get it, okay, can they spin out? So then full-back can try and get the ball in here. Then, if this player's taking that player out of there, do they follow? We can get a player dropping in to receive the ball and score. So again, players always involved at all times, okay, making sure we're scanning, being aware of the space around us, can we receive the ball, communicating with each other, our body shape to receive, and then taking risks to go forward. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.